Ladies and gentlemen, now it's Too Late with Alan Mosley.
What? Welcome back to the show, everybody. Welcome back to It's Too Late, number one late night show in America, not hosted by communists. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by the number one producer of late night. It's Dave Willimowski. Dave, how are you doing today?
Yep. Hi guys. Hey. I'm doing good. Hanging in there, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same
old.
Did you pass your test?
Yeah. A little test at a field trip. I went on an adventure.
Yeah.
It made me pee in a cup.
But look,
I don't know why I have to do that.
I talked about you about this morning. If you said you went on an adventure, but I asked you explicitly, did you grow as a person as a result of your experiences? Did it change you?
No, it was, like I said, it was kind of neat being outside of the shop, but no, it was kind of boring.
Then that was not a hero's journey.
No,
so
I don't think I accomplished anything.
Yeah, do it again.
Okay, I'll try again tomorrow.
Do it again. Uh, Before we get started, guys, let me tell you about tonight's sponsor, which is Fox and Sons Coffee, which you can find at
Oh,
foxandsons.com. Fans, if it's too late, use promo code ITL for 18% off orders,
wow.
$34.99 or more. Shipping is free on orders of $40 or more. You can find them at their
Nice.
website, which is foxandsons.com. I actually have, this is the Den Blend 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Oh, the sequel.
Yeah, you give it a little, do a little of that, and then just
Wow. I need to find somebody who'll sniff me like
I
that.
I feel like I'm missing a lot of the equipment necessary to consume this product, but I don't know enough about coffee. You know,
Just throw it in some hot water.
like, do I just melt
works.
this in a spoon and then do something, or I
You're
don't know.
gonna
Anyway,
freebase it. Yeah.
anyway, that's Fox and Sons Coffee. Use promo code ITL or website foxandsons.com. All right. So I figured, this week's a kind of a weird week because we already sat down with our guest for this evening, already had a whole show prepared because it's our final episode of Pride Month. So we're wrapping
Yeah.
up our Pride Month series this week on topics that we find really gay. But there was some really big news. Really big news. How about this? The founder
Sure
of
was.
WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Julian Assange is finally a free man, if you can even believe that. So everybody, I'm sure, has already seen the news, but kind of a quick little rundown. Apparently, they stamped out some kind of a plea deal where he's going to plead guilty to... I don't know what he's pleading guilty to exactly. It's something under the Espionage Act. But then they decided that, since we've been torturing you in solitary for years, we'll just call it time served.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like look,
Not
we,
even.
we already did the punishment without you actually facing any crime. So we'll just call it
Yeah.
time served. And so, everybody's seen the little video there of him like leaving the facility and getting in the van and signing the paperwork and all that stuff. And yeah, go ahead, Dave. Jesus Christ, feel
Okay.
free. How many
Well, we can-
signals do I have to freaking give you?
That
My
last one was
God.
pretty clear.
And you didn't do it anyway. You just didn't do it anyway. Right there. So you see him right there. I'm glad to
Wow.
see that he looks all right because that for a long time there was a lot of concerns that just the toll that it takes on you physically and mentally being in the position
bet.
that he was in. That I mean I couldn't even imagine. But he seems to be all right. I can't imagine how he's feeling right now.
Mhm.
But I want to kind of address some of the things around it, and then kind of just ultimately my takeaway on it. I hate to get political on the show here, but we'll do our best, do some channeling of the old gold standard here. So first things first, a lot of people have pointed out that this whole thing was orchestrated, or at least the presumption is that the Biden administration is orchestrating ultimately his release, and then he hasn't been pardoned. He did technically have to plead guilty. He went to Saipan, of all places, because he didn't want to have to go to the United States, so they had him go to a U.S. territory nearby where he could, go before a judge and have the hearing and all that stuff. And so they've already done all that, and he's already back in Australia. But the thing is that a lot of people have said is that, well, look, the Biden administration, it's an election year, and they're looking at the polls and they're thinking, we might be losing to Orange Man, and so let's just do something to kind of win us some independents and libertarian voters. Let's orchestrate the release of Julian Assange. And when a lot of people say that, they say it with just this girth of cynicism of that's the only reason that they did it, that he should have never been imprisoned in the first place. He should have been a free man. Nothing he did was a crime. And the only reason that they're releasing him is to, score political points, and I guess my point is that if the only reason that this is happening is for political gamesmanship between Biden and Trump, then okay. Okay, Like that's
Whatever
what
it
they
takes.
do. Yeah. Like God forbid that the pressure that they feel to one up each other for votes leads to a better world, right? Like just take the
Yeah.
W for God's sakes. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
like I know that there's going to be people out there like, look, if you're standing on principles in the Constitution, you're going to be waiting out in the rain for a long time. We live in a transactional political world where it's you vote for me and I give you X. Well, you vote for me and I give you Y, and whoever puts together the best resume wins. That's the system as it exists. And so if they're actually offering you something good along with your child abuse, just take the something good. Don't be that person who says, "Oh no, just child abuse for me, thanks." Like don't
I'm principled.
yeah, I'm principled. Don't be that guy. And that I can't help but to point out that you don't see a lot. By the way, you don't see a lot of like famous celebrities saying, "Oh, thank God Assange is released," because they never gave a shit. But there was one person I did see posting very negatively that, oh, Assange is a criminal and the information he released called soldiers to die. And that was Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence under Trump. And don't you worry, he got ratioed to oblivion on Twitter for daring. Like everyone was like, "Aren't you dead? Like why are you talking?" Somebody, my favorite comment that had somebody's comment that was only a few words had many thousands more likes than actual Mike Pence's tweet, which just said, nice. Your political career is over. Eat shit, LOL. But to that point, the reason I wanted to bring that up is that the only argument really there has ever been against Assange in the leaks that were orchestrated with WikiLeaks was that, well, he released classified information that put lives in danger. That there were actual U.S. servicemen who then were outed and soldiers were put in danger or killed because classified information was leaked and then it got to enemy hands before people could be recalled from the field or whatever. So it actually, I know you're going to be shocked. I'm glad you're sitting down, Dave. It turns out that's not true.
What?
Yeah, I know. So
They're lying?
when Assange actually went before a judge, because there is the FedGov representatives there because they're a part of the plea deal,
yeah.
The judge says that he's actually looking at the documents and says that, well, ultimately, I'm willing to sign off on time served. And one of the reasons I'm willing to sign off on this, the judge speaking, is that the prosecution, the state, has said that there was no actual identified physical injury. There was no victim. And so since no physical injuries could be identified, that's the same thing as saying all of that stuff about soldiers having been killed, that was verifiably false. But think about that for a second. Think about the implications of this. It was the state that entered those documents saying, no, we're okay with the plea deal because, nobody got hurt, which means they always knew that the leaks didn't cause anyone to get hurt, but they let that lie linger in the wind for years. Yeah. They let people like Mike Pence, even this very week, go out and tweet that lie when state officials knew it was a lie all along. Because that's how they operate. They always knew it was wrong. And so I want to kind of wrap this up with just kind of a few personal points on this, is that you'll see a lot of other people that'll say, that they're displeased that he pled out, right? Like he didn't, he wasn't truly exonerated. They didn't really drop the charges. He pled guilty to things. And I understand that potentially sets a terrible precedent and that they could go after journalists in the future using the same means. Look, I get all that. And should he be actually pardoned after the fact so that it's completely stricken from the record? Of course I agree with that. Yes. Of course. But there are still people who feel like somehow he sold out because he pled guilty rather than standing firm and saying, no, I'm willing to have my day in court. I didn't do anything wrong. All I have to say to those people is, you know what? You are more than welcome to take his place in jail.
Oh yeah, looks fun.
It's so easy to be a champion for liberty from your couch, wanting other people to die for your beliefies. You know,
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
it it reminded me of Erwin Schiff, Peter Schiff's dad. A lot of people know Peter Schiff, but they may not remember Erwin Schiff.
Hmm.
Of course, Peter Schiff is kind of crazy and retarded, and that's okay. We like Peter anyway. But his father, Erwin, was the one who actually died in custody for tax-related charges because he said taxation is theft. Come and get me. And you know what? They did.
He
And he
meant it.
died in prison. And he meant it. And by the
Yeah.
way, I don't think that's a good idea. I think you are a lot more valuable to the world being in the arms of your loved ones and making positive good in the world with what liberty you do have rather than dying on a cross. That's just me. But it doesn't matter. He did it. So all I'm saying is that unless you're that guy, you don't get to judge other people for how they fight their battles. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to do this off the cuff as opposed to like reading a script or having a bunch of imagery or stuff. Because I wanted it to really be genuine. But I feel like at the end of the day, I think my biggest takeaway from all of it is just sadness. It was 2013 that he really first got into some of the deep waters. And then it was 2018, I think, that he essentially was in prison, that they drug him out and threw him in Belmarsh and all that stuff. I remember being on the Gold Standard talking about it. Remember that show? I remember being like in the first or second year of the Gold Standard saying, "Oh, hey, Blake, we have breaking news. They're dragging Julian Assange out of the embassy. He's going to prison." And I remember thinking then, "Oh, dude, we're never going to see this guy again. They're throwing him in the hole and he's done." And they did throw him in the hole, but he got out. But man, that was even the point in which, if you only count it from the point in which he left the embassy, which that's still not fair. When he was locked up in the embassy, that was already bad. He was already essentially sequestered from the world. But if you're only counting the what was it, like 6 years that he was in Belmarsh just for them to ultimately let him go home after all of that time, it's like imagine yourself in that situation. Like, could you imagine being away from your family for 6 years, basically, like, on a technicality, you're just waiting out the timer? It reminded me of stories of people being falsely imprisoned. You see those sometimes where, somebody will be in jail for years or even decades, and then finally they're exonerated with DNA evidence or, whatever. And it's just like, you think that the whole world has moved on without you. Like you were just in stasis for that time, but the rest of the world wasn't. And you think, like, if you had kids, your kids grew up. If you had elderly parents, your parents passed away. All that happening while you were gone. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine going away and then coming back and like all your kids being adults? And
I don't.
Well,
I don't
and
like that.
It's something that you can never have that back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's gone. Nothing else that happens from that point forward can possibly replace what they took from you. I know that a lot of people in that position, because you see these stories too, where people finally get out, and so many of them are just so thankful to breathe free air again, that their biggest emotion is just joy, just joy, relief, I don't know Julian Assange, besides watching prepared statements and recorded interviews, but that's not knowing someone. I don't know Julian Assange. Maybe he is the kind of person who feels nothing but gratitude. And that would be wonderful if he is. But I just can't help but think, as I sit here talking to you now, that if it were me, I would just be so consumed with hatred that it would be like I died in there.
Yeah.
And then it would end up being a situation where that would be a prophecy that would prove self-fulfilling.
Oh.
So I hope he's not like me, but
Yeah. Let's hope.
I'm so happy he's out, but the whole thing's just tragic. I don't know.
Might be the beginning of his villain arc.
Well, they already consider him one. I mean, he's a
Oh,
hero
I
to
forgot.
everybody else. Yeah, that's why he was in prison. They already think he's a supervillain. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, I think that's all I have to say about that. And then tomorrow is the presidential debate between Trump and Biden.
Fun.
Yeah, so I can't wait. I'm actually wondering if Biden will bring it up. Like, oh, I did this week. Look at me. Because what's Trump going to say?
Yeah.
Because Trump had an opportunity to do the right thing and he didn't do it. And so I don't know. We'll see. Guys, we'll be back with the meme of the week in the viewer mail right after this commercial break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Hey, Dave.
Yes, Alan.
What time is it?
It's time for meme of the week. Took me a second.
Well, this show really changed direction, didn't it? But we do have a bonus meme. Check out the bonus meme.
Wow.
There's a theme in tonight's memes.
Yeah. Wow. It says right on the side of the pool.
Yeah, the monologue's over. We're done with all that crap. We're moving on to the good times. Speaking of the good times, we're out of time.
Oh,
we did
yeah.
all that work to set up the viewer mail over on Twitter, and we're completely...
Yeah, we'll try again next week.
Yeah. Do you think we should? Do you think we actually should do the right big boy thing and skip the viewer mail?
No.
All right, let's go ahead and answer the viewer mail. We're going to do it really quick, though.
Real quick.
Yeah, because we actually are out of time. All right, we got to go really quick, Dave. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right,
ready.
Andrew Avery writes, Dear Alan and Dave, is an alligator in a three-piece suit an investigator? Andrew, that joke's been around forever. You are fired. Justin Campbell writes, Dear Alan and Dave, are you excited about UT winning the College World Series? Yes. Or are you a godless heathen who doesn't like baseball? I'm excited they won, and I don't like baseball.
Oh.
Dude, baseball sucks. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's boring.
It's a
It's only
football
fun to
world.
play.
Like,
Yeah.
feel free to join this current century, for God's sake. All right. Excuse me, at the Hapitarian. We got to start doing the ats now because I feel like maybe people don't want me to identify. I'm doxing everyone.
Yeah.
I'm doxing everyone. Yeah, I feel so.
Right in, so we could dox you.
All right, so the Hapitarian, whose name is actually Shane, writes, Dear Alan and Dave, what are y'all's thoughts on the Dabbleverse? What the hell is the Dabbleverse?
What the hell is that?
Can somebody Google that for me while we move on? Nick White writes, Dear Alan and Dave, what's your favorite season? Summer. Dave?
Fall. Yeah, fall.
Okay.
Fall's best.
All right. Well, we're in Alan's season, so you wait your turn. All right. DeBee's Sneeze, which looks a lot like Celeste, writes, Dear Alan and Dave, what is your favorite breakfast pastry? Ooh.
I think it would be like some kind of strawberry streusel.
Yeah.
Streusel. That's the crumbly stuff.
Do you remember those toaster strudels? Do you remember those with the little pack of...
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, those were Pop-Tarts for the rich kids.
Yeah,
But they
rich
had to
kid
do their own
Pop-Tarts.
work. I didn't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like how quaint. We have to do our own icing, mama. Yeah. All right. Anyway, all right. At Goated Farmer writes, Dear Alan and Dave, what was your favorite animal at the petting zoo during the annual live event? Oh man,
That's easy.
for me it was the lemurs literally grabbed my
Oh.
hand and just chewed on me for 20 minutes. I didn't know to be excited or upset.
Yeah, I didn't get to have a moment with the lemur, so mine's the sloth.
Oh yeah.
He was rad. He had the best vibe. I like that guy.
Yeah, that's what he does all day.
Yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah. You want that's look into the future. All right. Jonathan Carranza writes, what's your favorite episode of Cowboy Bebop? Man, there's not a bad one, Jonathan. It is one of or the greatest anime of all time. The 2-part finale, that's an easy one.
Oh no, mushroom.
Also,
Samba.
nobody.
Dude, it reminded viewers how weird that show could really be. It's hands down the best.
Fuck you. I know what you're doing. All right. Dear Alan, all right, Dave, give me a quick synopsis of the episode Mushroom Samba.
Oh, we don't have time for that. We gotta
Oh
get
yeah,
going.
that's right. We're out of time. You're right. Aaron Kittner writes, Dear Alan and Dave, if you could only drink one beverage for the rest of your life, what would it be? Dave?
I guess I was trying to think of something. I guess it'd be like a mildly sweet tea, mellow tea. Yeah.
See, all the nerds are gonna say water so that you'll like live and not drop dead. But nah, dude. Like
yeah.
I'm doing sun drop so I can go hard and go home.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? All right. Brooke Atkinson writes, Dear Alan and Dave, if you were a supervillain, what would your ultimate goal be? What's your ultimate goal, supervillain, Dave?
I guess just have my own island and just kind of drop out. I don't know.
Then how are you a supervillain? No, what's your goal? What are you trying to do with your villainy?
Oh,
Look at all this time you're
I don't
wasting.
know. Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
I got nothing.
Yeah,
I don't
Brooke
know.
is literally here and just said that's weak.
don't
I
wanna
just want to
bother
watch the
people.
world burn myself.
Yeah.
I don't discriminate. See, I would be that kind of villain where I'm justice man. I bring everyone to justice. So it's like, oh, little Timmy stole your ice cream cone. Boom. You know, just
Wow.
yeah. Libertarian Giggles writes, Dear Alan and Dave, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? Okay, so it used to be like cookies and cream, and then it was Reese's peanut butter cup, but now it's banana pudding ice cream at that place downtown here. Oh, they call it Nana Pudding. Oh my God.
I bet you that'd be good. I just bought some that was like a banana graham cracker ice cream. That the family seemed to love it. I didn't get any of it.
Oh, dang. Well, it's their turn to buy for you then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jesus. All right. And finally,
Death by chocolate.
Good Soup writes, Dear Alan and Dave, what's the grossest thing you ever had to clean up at work? Oh, D3's about to find out, isn't he?
Yeah.
You go learn tomorrow.
Yeah. For me, it was just the women's room in general. I don't know what goes on in there, but it's always the worst.
They are disgusting monsters. Yeah, they are demented people.
I don't know what they do in there. Evidently, it's complicated.
Yeah, they're disgusting, unfit to go in public. You know what? This is why they got to wait in the car. Boy, after that, so happy to be joined tonight by our friend Kerry Baldwin of Mere Liberty. Right after this commercial break. Don't go away. Your ad could be playing right now, reaching thousands of potential customers. Sadly, it's not, but it could be. Find out how to be an advertised sponsor for It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. Email us at info@alanmosley.tv. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Tonight we are wrapping up our series on Pride Month, the topics that we think are particularly gay. And joining us tonight from MereLiberty.com is, of course, the reformed libertarian herself, Kerry Baldwin. Who better to talk about some of the spicy topics we're going to talk about tonight than Kerry Baldwin? Kerry, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on again.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to get right off to it. As just a very broad term, we're going to talk a little bit about parents' rights. So before we say anything else, if I were to say to you, I want to talk about the policy position of parents' rights, what does that mean?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's actually no really good definition of it. If I'm honest, it depends on if you're conservative or if you're liberal. Generally speaking, though, parents believe that they have the right to raise their children any way they want. And sometimes that means raising them in a traditional home, and sometimes that means raising them in a non-traditional home. And that's where a lot of the confusion sets in.
Well, it's funny that literally right before we sat down to do this, I was watching a presentation by my friend Tyler Yonke, who actually is a family lawyer, and I believe he's actually in California. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but that is where he's based out of, and he was talking about how this is in fact one of the difficulties that there is a lot of nuance and subjectivity to. What are parents' rights? What is the best interest of the child? Because obviously, right. If you're going to say, if a family judge in a family law court is going to say, well, I want proof of what you're doing is in the best interest of the child. Well, who determines that? I mean, you have to define these things somewhere, or the whole thing is going to be left totally up to chance of who happens to be sitting on the bench, right?
Yeah, well, the phrase "the best interest of the child," was coined at a time when that seemed to be common sense, obvious, and it no longer is. And so, when it comes to family law, everything is really left up to the opinion of the family court judge themselves. What do they consider is in the best interest of the child? And that's going to depend quite heavily on their own politics, their own, their own societal preferences, their own weaknesses and flaws. It depends heavily upon the individual judge itself, which raises some very serious questions about what we can objectively call parents' rights and children's rights, and where we can objectively say the state should intervene or not.
By the way, I love that you referred to the judge as itself. Absolutely, it is an it. So obviously, one of the things that we're going to kind of tiptoe around as we get into it tonight is particularly the transgender. Movement, I don't feel like is the right word, but that's a word. Everything's a movement now, right?
Yeah.
There's the cell phone movement, there's the coffee movement, and there's the transgender movement. But I think a lot of people have kind of dug in their heels, and you have, on one far side saying that, well, everyone can just decide what they are at a whim, and whatever they say, that's what you should respect. And the other side saying that there's man and women and mental illnesses, and those are the only categories that you could fall into. But no matter where you fall on that, I think there's a more nuanced take on, but we're not talking about some 40-year-old in their basement making that decision. We're talking about children. Mm-hmm. Because and obviously, where I'm going with this is that, well, if children can't sign contracts, if children can't fight in the military, thank God, which that's another topic altogether that's in the news right now. If children aren't supposed to smoke or drink or whatever, then how could children possibly be making consequential determinations about things like that? But in particular, that's going to result in medical procedures or prescriptions that are going to irrevocably change who they are physically, while perhaps never being able to change who they are metaphysically. So obviously, when you add children into the mix, it's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, well, I would say this is one of those questions that libertarians have an opportunity to answer, but most libertarians have not actually done their due diligence on this, which is the issue of how do you sort out rights for children when children are not developed. They're developing over time, and it takes, quite frankly, 25 years roughly for a child to develop into a full-blown adult. I mean, we say we don't send children off to war, but in one sense, we really do. If they're 18 years old, their frontal lobes are not fully developed. So, as far as how do we figure this out, we have to go back to a question of how do we define human rights? And for libertarians, that's the principle of self-ownership. But a lot of people have made some fairly obtuse, we'll say, arguments for how you can determine whether or not a child has developed their self-ownership. And generally speaking, the way that I think about this is offspring, children, are self-owners from the moment conception is complete, which means that they're entitled to negative rights. But they don't develop the ability to consent to things, or rather, they do develop that ability to consent to things, but that's over time as they develop into adults. And so their capacity to consent is naturally limited based upon their development. A child could, a toddler could reasonably consent to sharing their toy if they understand what that means, what the consequences are, and that sort of thing. But they can't, as you said, sign a contract because they don't know what that means. They don't know what the consequences are. And when it comes to their sexuality is developing. And so they don't have the capacity yet to understand the full implications of those decisions. Now, with that said, there's lots of parents out there who think that they are being very well intentioned, or providing for the child's health care by making those decisions for them. And on the surface, this seems legitimate because parents make a lot of healthcare decisions for their kids, right? They get to decide, okay, do you get cough medicine? Do you get Tylenol or ibuprofen or whatever when you're sick? If surgery is necessary, the parents, they're the ones making those decisions themselves. But one question that we have to ask is whether parents can actually make a decision about changing a fundamental feature of their child's identity, and whether or not that even falls under quote unquote healthcare.
Well, I think a couple of things that I sort of find interesting is that, and God bless our libertarian friends, how much we love them, but there's a type of person who misses the forest from the trees, I think, when it comes to being a dogmatic principle type of a person, that they would say, well, on the whole, we don't want government involved in making these decisions. We want those decisions to remain in the home with the parents. And I agree. Mm-hmm. But we also have to have a mutual understanding. You talked about earlier that some of these terms that we're throwing around were brought up when it was a common sense understanding what this meant. Right. Well, on the same way that it may be true, I may agree with that person and say, well, it's true that I don't want the state involved in making decisions for your children. That should be up to you. On the other hand, I can't just sit by and watch you chemically castrate your children because you think that's, and on that point, before I throw this back over to you, it's hard for me to get on board, just no matter how devil's advocate I'm possibly trying to be, it's hard for me to get on board with any of this stuff as being more than a social fad when you see these celebrity parents and activist parents who, when transgender children make up like 0.5% of the population, and yet they have 5 kids and 4 of them are trans. Come on. Yeah, I mean, What are, as Norm Macdonald would say, what are the odds,
What are the odds? Yeah. Yeah, I think there are two different types of libertarians. There are the libertarians who think, okay, our rule of thumb is keep government out of everything. And then there are the libertarians who understand that libertarian is a legal philosophy, which necessarily means that government is involved in something, right? And even our libertarian friends who think that government should stay out of as much as possible would actually agree that if they have their rights violated, the government should step in and intervene in some way. So it's an interesting conversation to have, because the ones who are saying, no, this is a legal philosophy which entails government intervening in certain ways, those tend to be the more, we'll say, culturally traditional people who are actually trying to sort out, okay, when is it proper for the government to intervene or not? And whereas on the other side, it's, oh, well, this decision should be left between the parents and their children and the doctor. Well, that's all well and good, but I have seen plenty of examples of parents being left to decisions with their children that are absolutely reprehensible. So if we can agree that there are things that parents can do that are reprehensible, that are even rights violations, then we have to agree that there's a time and place for government to intervene. The big question mark is where and when. How do we define that? And that's sort of the conversation that's happening right now with libertarians. And I would say the unfortunate part is libertarian thinkers really haven't thought this one through. You have people like Rothbard and Hoppe who have basically argued that children don't have rights until they can tell their parents no. But I know plenty of toddlers who tell their parents no, and they don't. They've got a very primitive understanding of the world. At any rate, but it raises some interesting questions about, what constitutes a decision that the parent has a right to make. What constitutes actual health care? I think we can call into question whether or not this gender-affirming care even falls under the category of health care. It's very easy to say words like affirming and make it sound positive, when in reality, if you're affirming something that's untrue, or you are affirming something that is damaging the health of that child, then it's arguably not healthcare. In which case we need to ask these questions.
Well, that's because I know that there are plenty of people that would make the argument that really any doctor that performs surgeries where they are, to use pretty frank words, they're mutilating someone's body in order to make them appear to be something that they were not born as, that already is against the Hippocratic Oath, that they are causing harm. Now that may, even if that's what a patient says that they wanted, but you are causing harm in order to fulfill an aesthetic need more than a physical need. But specifically, because again, it's a different conversation to have if you have a 45-year-old that decides, I want to go through some kind of procedure, I want to take, testosterone or what have you in order to change biologically.
Right.
Now, look, even with that person, you can make the argument of, well, if that person has regret, if they ultimately come around to the line of thought, well, this I shouldn't have done this. Say I want to sue my doctor because they hurt me and they should not have done this. I'm not saying that that's not a conversation to have. It is, but they were an adult that made that decision, so they played a role. They played a role in it. But again, going back to children in particular, you hear all the statistics of particularly like teen suicides, which arguably could be tied more specifically to teen depression than necessarily transgenderism. But you hear all these different cases of regret, of kids who go through a phase, that wind up taking puberty blockers or wind up having surgery. And then 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, they then decide, oh, this was wrong, that this was something that I grew out of, but now I have been irrevocably changed. There's nothing I can do now. It kind of raises some interesting questions, even for our libertarian friends. Now, for the libertarian friends, that the kind of people that believe everybody should be subject to suit, to liability, and that's how the free market handles things. That, well, if a kid underwent these types of things at 15 and now they're 25, should they be able to sue the doctor? Should they be able to sue their parents?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think this is a huge question. First of all, I think we're in this mess because we don't have a free market in medicine. I think that needs to be stated very plainly. The healthcare industry in America is highly, highly regulated by the government. And if the government says that you have to, take X, Y, and Z position on, this particular ailment, or you're going to lose your license, if you're a doctor and your livelihood is threatened, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to take a look at this. And you're either going to go straight along with it, or you are going to be very, very uneasy about, about navigating that whole minefield. But generally speaking, doctors are not in, they don't sign up for this so that they can just take the orders of the government. They do this because they want to care for patients. I do think that when you have a child that is experiencing gender dysphoria, which is quite frankly not uncommon. I mean, it comes in varying degrees, but most children, especially when going through adolescence, early adolescence, puberty, things like this, they are not comfortable in their own bodies. This is that's part of growing up. I don't know a single person that thought that was the greatest time of their life. And so when you have a situation where the government is dictating that a child not only be affirmed in their discomfort of their own body, but they're telling doctors, you can't discourage this. You can't discourage the discomfort that they feel, rather encourage them that, they're perfectly fine the way they were born. It muddies the waters. If you had a free market in healthcare where doctors were actually free to pursue the Hippocratic Oath, I do not believe that you would have doctors making decisions like that. I mean, you might have a handful that are taking advantage of people, but by and large, it would create a huge liability for them that they wouldn't want to take on. They wouldn't want the lawsuits from, disappointed adults, much less disappointed children. I think that you would have a whole lot more people in the medical profession speaking out and saying, no, this is absurd. So, it's very easy, I think, to think of those libertarians, shall we say, on the left that think, okay, let's just get government out of all of it. Yeah, let's get government out of healthcare, 100%. Get them out, because I think they're the ones that are creating this problem. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that if you have, Dr. Kevorkian over here making really bad decisions under the guise of healthcare, that he should be let off the hook for his malpractice.
Well, on that note, guys, we're going to be back with more from Kerry Baldwin right after this commercial break. Don't go away. Tonight's show is proudly sponsored by Fox & Sons Coffee. Fans of It's Too Late use code ITL for 18% off orders of $34.99 or more. Shipping is free on orders of $40 or more. You can find them on their website, which is foxandsons.com. That's foxandsons.com. Welcome Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're joined once again by our friend Kerry Baldwin, the Reformed Libertarian. Kerry, we've kind of already opened up some of these various Pandora's boxes.
Yes.
We talked about state mandates and gender-affirming care, all that. So I want to start off with this one. What do you think about school districts hiding information from the parents in regard to the child's pronouns, their sexual orientation, etc.?
Well, I think it's abusive and grooming outright. The idea that an adult who's not, that is not the child's parent can influence how that child views their own body, or influences what the child does with their own body, and then says, "Shh, don't tell your parents." That is a classic example of an abuser. And so the fact that schools are doing this should be raising red flags literally left and right, especially because especially on the left, because the left is supposed to be opposed to abuses in the system. It should be raising red flags that there are abusers in our school, there are abusers in our schools, and there are abusers who are dictating policy about our kids' education experience. I think it should be a full stop, what the hell are we doing sort of situation, because that's just classic example of grooming behavior.
Well, we've already used the phrase gender-affirming care, which I know is one of your favorite phrases to talk about. So is particularly as it pertains to the idea of state-mandated gender-affirming care. Of course, what the state means by that is whatever the child says their gender is in that moment, then that will be affirmed. There's not going to be any nuanced conversation of, well, let's talk about this. Why do you feel that way? Do you feel perhaps this is a phase? Is this something that you felt suddenly? Is this something you felt for a long time? No, typically there's not a conversation, because there's very seldomly nuance when it comes to the state and to the government. There's always whatever is, and I wanted to bring up in particular, there are states, California being an example, that has now codified into state law the recognition of a expressed gender as being tied at the hip to the concept of the best interest of the child, meaning that if a child tells, I'm gonna be a little bit on the nose here, instead of calling them teachers or guidance counselors, say if a child tells an agent of the state, "Oh, I've decided I'm actually a girl, not a boy, which is what I was born as," and then the parents say, "Well, that's silly, Jimmy's a boy, we don't accept that." That as far as the state is concerned, they now have carte blanche to go after you.
Yeah, I think it's absurd, and I think that a very simple analogy demonstrates the absurdity. I mean, it should be absurd on its face, right? That a toddler or a young child who says, "I feel like doing boy things, even though I'm a girl," doesn't necessarily mean he's saying or she's saying, "I want to be a boy." But a very simple analogy is, if a child came up to you and was pretending to be a pirate and said, "I want to be a pirate now," we wouldn't go surgically remove one of their legs and install a peg leg and gouge out one of their eyes so that they could have a patch. Like, we wouldn't do that. That's patently absurd. Kids do this. They explore the world through mimicry, through trying new things, and a boy who wants to play with a doll isn't necessarily thinking, "I'm a girl now." Like, this whole thing is actually reinforcing all of the gender stereotypes that we've been saying for years aren't a big deal. It doesn't matter if little Jimmy likes the color pink. He's not any less of a boy for liking the color pink. That's a little bit overly simplistic, but when you get children who are playing around with these ideas, just exploring the world, and then an adult comes around and says to them, "Oh, little Jimmy's playing with a doll, you must be a girl." Then they're putting ideas into that child's head, and that's not this idea that that's gender affirming care is absolutely ridiculous. If it was genuinely gender affirming, it would be, oh, little Jimmy likes playing with dolls. Okay, he's still a boy. Like there's so what? Let's get you a GI Joe. That's a doll for boys.
Well, of course, I want to be a Jedi, so I'm not paying my taxes again until I get a lightsaber. Not paying them again. One thing I did want to make sure we talk a little bit about is the science of transgenderism, and what I really mean by that in this context is the authorship, the research of any topic. We're talking about transgenderism tonight, but arguably you could talk about practically anything in the science R&D field, in so much as you don't know this about me, but for a while I was the vice president of a arts guild here in Middle Tennessee. And as a lot of people who have been in that position, a lot of people who have been involved in nonprofits know, you got to have grant writers, right? You got to just constantly be writing for grants because, and cover your ears, libertarians. But grant money, particularly state and federal, that's how they're paying their bills. Unfortunately, communities tend not to pay for things like that. I've made the argument before that it's always a tender notion to think that, oh, well, if the community really wants X, then the community will pay for it. Guys, the community has never paid for anything. It's usually a very philanthropic 1%, 2%, or 3% that pay for the community to have things. And absent them, if you're not getting federal grants, you're not getting it. And it's way worse when it comes to science, right? Because the kind of people who go the academic route and they become chemists or biologists or engineers and they decide they want to do research, federal funding for research is borderline a monopoly on the field. And so if there is a monopoly on funding for research that's afforded by the state, and then the state has an agenda, then for you to bite the hand that feeds and come up with research that is counter to the narrative they want to espouse, you're essentially putting a gun to the head of your own career. Do you see that in this particular case with transgenderism?
Well, strictly speaking, I haven't read a whole lot of the science on transgenderism, but I will say, generally speaking, that is true about not just grant funding, but scientific research is, if it's not paid for by federal or state grants, it's paid for by the pharmaceutical companies. And yes, the pharmaceutical companies also basically write all of the textbooks for medical school. They're the ones that are determining licensing requirements that are set down by the federal bureaucracies. It's a huge revolving door. I should say it's a very narrow revolving door of people who have control in various sectors, whether it's the education sector or the pharmaceutical sector or the healthcare sector, and the associated bureaucracies that go along with that. And so, yes, it's an effective monopoly, even though you have multiple sectors with their hands in the cookie jar. But it is very narrow, and it's a revolving door. And so there's no way to get out of it. If you're a medical professional and you start bucking the system, you get your license threatened, your very livelihood is threatened. And then what can you do? You can't practice medicine.
Well, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about tonight before we run out of time, because of course this is our last episode of Pride Month, so I would be remiss not to bring this up. But this was a topic that in particular I wanted to talk with you about, because I want to threaten your career as well. So the 13th Amendment, of course, as we all know, abolished slavery. You can't buy people in this country anymore, Kerry Baldwin, unless you're a gay couple that wants a child. And then, somehow, it is okay. Now, I know that I'm using some rather inflammatory language, but what do you think about the modern trend, and particularly the celebration of seeing gay couples essentially financing the birth and adoption of children?
You mean like surrogacy and that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely that, and that would probably be a less nefarious a somewhat less nefarious way of looking about it. In particular, really what kind of motivates me for this is because, as people know, I'm always harder on the right wingers on the show than I am the left wingers. And in my defense, it's because I don't think the left they're totally irredeemable. So when I'm being harder on the right wingers, it's because I'm telling you, you guys have to be better than this. But you see, it's become a very popular thing these days for right wingers who are trying to show that they're hip and they're with it with modern culture, that they're celebrating gay couples. Like, take Dave Rubin. Rubin and his husband. Oh, they've got kids now. Well, I'm pretty sure neither of them gave birth to any of them, so I don't know how that came along.
Yeah, I think the issue is that somewhere along the line, somebody knows somebody who's gay who doesn't at least come off as being somebody who's going to abuse children. And so there's this space in your mind that's sort of set aside for, okay, if a child absolutely needs parents and these are their only option, if they're otherwise good parents, why the heck not? The problem is that you keep seeing these reports coming up of homosexual couples that have adopted or, they've done the surrogacy route or that sort of thing. And there is some very obvious troubling things going on there. I would say this has a lot to do with the fact that this isn't just, the social trend of our time. It's something that's been politicized. I think Dave Smith was on some show, I forget what it was, but he made this really good point, which was, none of these topics were an issue in 2012, even 2016. They became like nobody was searching for problems with racism or transgender ideology or like these things weren't in the narrative.
Sure.
These things, this narrative was foisted on us, and it was foisted on us by people who are trying to demoralize the culture. It puts us in the position of having to talk about it and sort through it. But I think that, those conservatives who are, trying to play both sides are doing it because they know people that aren't these abusive people. But, at the same time, you've got this other stuff in your face that's clearly abusive.
Well, and I know what I see so often that people point out is that, well, you'll see a lot of gay couples who will adopt, but it is overwhelmingly male couples that are adopting male children, which just right off the jump, people can't help but raise eyebrows of, well, what's going on there? And then sometimes you do see cases of abuse, which of course is horrific. But it is true that these things just sort of kind of got shoved into the national consciousness in recent years. And in episodes past, I've made the point of, look, I am not simping for Sarah Palin. I'm the last person on planet Earth that you're going to find that's a big Sarah Palin fan. But right. I can't help but sit here and remember how Saturday Night Live and CNN and all the usual suspects were all just, she was just so beneath their contempt that they didn't even bother addressing anything she said. They just laughed at her. Look what a court jester Sarah Palin is. And the things that they laughed at her the most about, because there's certainly plenty of policy positions that Sarah Palin holds that I don't agree with, but the things that they ridiculed her the most about was when she would kind of bring up the old trope of, all this is slippery slope stuff. If the right gets on board with X, Y, and Z, it's going to turn into A, B, and C. And that was just so silly that they laughed her off stage. And even a bunch of right wingers like, oh, that's just cookie Sarah Palin. We'll find a better candidate next time. Right. And yet, here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that slippery slope. It's that whole fallacy is not to say that things won't go that way. And certainly it doesn't have to go that way, but we're a culture that does not think critically to begin with. So of course things fall into a slippery slope. And, I mean, it's unfortunate, I teach classes in critical thinking. And I really wish that people would start thinking through things more clearly and succinctly. But yeah, I think there are a lot of things happening. I mean, the latest thing with the what is it, the DOD wanting to now draft women, right?
Sure. Yeah.
This was something that everybody said wouldn't be done because it would create a slippery slope. Guess what? We're having this conversation now. So if I think the real problem is if you aren't willing to think about these things and think about why that's a slippery slope and you know what it would actually take to get to that point. If you're not willing to think about it and you're just going to dismiss it, then yeah, it's probably going to happen.
Well, one last thing before we wrap up, because I sort of kind of forgot about this one, is along the same lines of the adoption practices by gay couples. There's also, you may recall this, is that for many years, there was the general company line, particularly on the conservative side, which was, oh, they're coming for our kids. We got to protect our kids. And and the response to that was, no one's coming for your kids, you kooky conspiracy theorists. But then you have like, I don't know if you saw this or not, but there was like a men's choir out on the West Coast that did a song where they were literally singing, we're gay and we're coming for your kids.
Yeah.
Do you believe there's anything to the concept that, because I know that there's people that point out that birth rates are not exactly super high right now. Big shocker, the radical environmentalists that think the world is overpopulated and the gay community don't have as many kids. I know that's super shocking to fathom. Do you believe that because of the lack of their own children, that necessarily means that that's one of many reasons why they want your kids?
Oh yeah, I've heard this before, right? They don't have their own children, and you have to, whether your intentions are nefarious or not, or they're good, right? If you want culture to adopt a particular ideology, you have to have your offspring pick up these ideas. Well, if they aren't producing offspring, whose offspring are going to pass on those ideas? So, again, I think a major factor in this whole thing is the degree of government involvement and this phrase "in the best interest of the child" that always gets exploited by anybody with tyrannical motivations. If anything, this is why we should be pulling government out of every facet of society that we can possibly pull them out of. Because they are coming after our children. They need that, whether it's a tax base or a military fighting base or somebody to hand off this transgender ideology to. They need kids, and the only ones that are having kids are the ones that actually want to procreate and have a future for them. Although even with that, if birth rates are falling the way they're falling, you probably have a lot of people who are reluctant to bring kids into the world, even though they want them, and they don't have these nefarious motivations.
Well, there's so many other things that we could talk about. I the whole time that we're sitting here talking just now, wrapping up, I'm thinking in my head that, it was just a common plank of the Republican Party until not that long ago to abolish the Federal Department of Education. Look, the government's done a terrible job of educating kids, but that wasn't even the issue. The issue is that what happens when your enemies take control of education, right? And here we are. Yeah. With that said, Kerry, where can people go to support you and get more of your content?
Oh my gosh, you can find everything at mereliberty.com. I have a podcast called Dare to Think. I'm also the co-host of the Reformed Libertarians podcast. You can find that at reformedlibertarians.com. And as I said, I do teach classes in critical thinking using the Socratic method. You can find information about that at libertyseminar.com.
On that note, Kerry, it's time for the bonus round. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Is a vanilla soy latte a 3-bean soup?
Let's see. Yes. It totally is.
That is correct. A vanilla soy latte is, in fact, a 3-bean soup. Kerry Baldwin is 2-0
Yeah.
on It's Too Late. Kerry, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Alan. This is fun.
Guys, we'll be back to wrap up the show right after this commercial break. Don't go away. If you're enjoying tonight's show, consider supporting the program by becoming a member of our Patreon. That's over at patreon.com/Alan Mosley. Like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Alan Mosley TV. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/Alan Mosley TV. Shut the fuck up. Subscribe to our YouTube page. It's youtube.com/Alan Mosley TV. Also, if you're more of a listener than a watcher, use our favorite podcasting platforms for us. Thanks to Spotify. It's Too Late with Alan Mosley or Alan Mosley TV. Dave, do you have a final thought?
Man, that was a fun interview. She's great.
Yeah, 2-0. How that 2-0 on the food quiz?
Yeah, 2-0. She looked happy.
Yeah, that's the only reason they come on the show.
Oh, I gotta beat my record.
What do you think? Just a little after party?
Yeah, real short. I'm exhausted.
I'm surprised we're still dressed. You got more dressed up at the end of the show than you were at the beginning of the show. Make it make sense.
I got chilly down here.
Got chilly. You just go outside here and be warm right up. Guys,
yeah, it's warm out here.
You got any more commentary? You good?
No, I'm done.
Okay. Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of It's Too Late, and we will see you next week. Talks during the ad read. Talks during the finale.
I thought we were still conversating.
We've been over this. You got to watch Castlevania before we conversate again.
Oh, yeah. You don't respect me.
Yeah, he's going to have a tux on during the after party, says Lyle.
After 10 now. Jeez.
Yeah. Does it feel like the credits are taking longer?
To mock you.
Am I having a stroke right now?